Yeah, at least kick us off since Russ is presenting.
All right. Okay.
I'm going to answer comments in chat.
Sweet. All right. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for NashJS Remote Edition. It's a new format for us. We did it again. We did it previously last month, and it was a lot of fun. We're going to kind of keep doing this for the foreseeable future until this COVID stuff is past us. So again, thanks for joining. Tonight, we're joined by myself, Josh Cipher, Russ Anderson, and Isaac Weber. Oh, sorry, I got a visitor. Okay, buddy. So we got Russ. Russ is going to give a lightning talk first on was it Lodash, right, Russ?
Yeah.
Cool. And then after that, Isaac's going to give a talk on Vue.js and GraphQL. I think like a full stack. Is it like isomorphic rendering and all the whole? Is that what they call it these days? I don't know. I'm out of touch. So
it will always be isomorphic.
Full on React. Not React, full on Vue, GraphQL, a full stack build here. So y'all stay tuned. Do we have any announcements, Josh, or anything you want to share with everybody before we get started?
Yes. So I am working with a larger effort across the board for companies that have recently laid people off and companies that are looking to hire. So I'm trying to connect some of these large lists. So there's been a lot of layoffs, obviously, but there's still a lot of opportunity out there, and I'm trying to connect that. If you have one of these lists where you have a group of people that have been laid off and you want to try to get some visibility around that, I'd love to talk to you about it. So you can either reach out to me on NashDev, you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm just at Joshua Cipher, send me a direct message through YouTube chats, through whatever. You'll pretty easy to find. So please do. I'd love to get some signal around that, share it to some people in Silicon Valley, share it to some people like nationwide and even internationally, just trying to help some good people get placed with jobs, because there's a lot of companies out there that are still doing well and really do want to try to soak up some good talent right now. So please reach out to me. I'm trying to put together a much bigger effort across the web, trying to connect people. So that's all I got right now.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. And I was gonna say, if you're not already on NashDev, check out nashdev.com. It's Nashville-based or Nashville and Middle Tennessee-based Slack community geared towards the developers. It's free to join. There's about 6,000 or so members on there right now, and we'd love to have you. And if you're looking for a job or you have a job, there's a jobs channel or a freelance channel. Get on there and join the discussion, and we'd be super pumped to have you there. So yeah, without further ado, Russ with his Lodash lightning talk. Take it away,
yeah,
Russ.
Thanks, y'all. So let me present here. And then I need the obligatory, can everyone see my screen? Confirmation? Is that a yes?
I can see it. It looks good.
All right, sweet. So I wanted to give this talk. I've sort of been wanting to, I've been wanting to talk about Lodash for a few years. And this will, I know there's a lot of newbies in the community. If you are very familiar with Lodash, then hopefully you can still take something away from this short little lightning talk of some ways that I use it. Lodash is a utility library for JavaScript, and it's basically it was originally a fork of another library called Underscore, which I believe was written by the same folks who wrote the Backbone framework back in the day, which was kind of the first JavaScript framework for kind of creating full applications in JavaScript. So Lodash started as a fork of that, and a lot of the things there are a lot of things in Lodash that are like stuff that you just kind of wish was native to JavaScript. And in fact, a lot of the things that are in Lodash, if you go to the library and you start perusing it, you'll be like, why does this function exist? Because this function already exists in ES6. Well, a lot of the inspiration for some of the things that we have in ES6 came from libraries like Lodash. So they said this was a really good utility. Let's just add it to the spec. So I'm going to go. They have one of the things that I want to do with this talk is, yes, you could just go here and you could just read their documentation and you can read about like all the ways that the ways that the functions behave. But I found that for me, I really have a hard time wrapping my mind around something until I like can understand a use case for it. So I'm just going to cherry pick about 4 of these functions and show you how I would use them in a day-to-day basis to kind of give you an idea of like what this library could do. And then hopefully, you know, if you don't use Lodash already, the thing about Lodash is it's just so broad that it's really hard to know. There's stuff buried in here that I don't know what it does because I've never taken all the time to like go through it. So, so hopefully I will find a few things that maybe you didn't know before. So first thing, I actually, I am going to start at the top, believe it or not. So this is probably the one, maybe the one if you have read it, then you would have started with the chunk method. But I'm going to kind of give some examples of how I have used these. Lodash breaks their functions up. They kind of group them by category. And I'm going to hit a few of these different categories and choose 1 or 2 from each one. Well, not from each one, from a couple of these categories. But let's start with array. So chunk is basically, you're going to start with an array and you then pass in an argument that basically tells you to break it up into arrays of a given size. Okay, great. That's awesome. How would we actually use that? So this is the way that I've used chunk before. I've used it a lot kind of when it comes to displaying UIs. So here is an app I made a long time ago, but it's going to serve as sort of our the place where I can demonstrate some of this stuff. And I was working in it today, and I realized that I haven't updated the dependencies in a while, and it's a React app, and it's so far behind React that fragment isn't even a thing yet. So I don't know when that was released, but it was a long time ago. But it still works. It still works great, and it still just spins up. So kudos to Create React app. So where I might use this. So this is basically, this app is just consuming Marvel's free API. I just decided to build this as kind of like a test base. This is what I used when I wanted to sort of learn how React worked. And it basically just makes a request for, I've got kind of characters and I've got series. It just pulls down their API and renders images here and then gives some links. So that code sort of looks like this. Content list. I am fetching, and then essentially when the fetch is over, I am setting a list on state of the results. And you can sort of see the results in here. Here's the data coming back from the API and the results. Can you guys see that, or does that even need to be bigger? There we go. And then those results I'm setting to state, and in React, I am just looping over them to, and I've got a card component that creates this card. So one of the ways that I might use chunk, and I have used it before, is to kind of break up this UI. One of the things that I have to do, for better or worse, at my job is I have to put ad placements in UI. So let's say that we wanted to add a little advertisement for a cat in here somewhere. What we could do is we could use Lodash chunk. we could create a chunked list, a set of chunks. So that's going to give us this list broken up into 8s. And then we can then map over the chunks, and we're going to basically have, instead of one list to map over, we would have whatever my limit here is 50. So whatever 50 divided by 8 is, plus 2. So let's map over all of those and insert an image in here. So now we have 8 of these and a little kitty. So imagine that's an ad or whatever you want to put there. That's one really nice thing to use chunk for, is you can sort of build things into your UI. All right, moving on. With array, that's just sort of one of kind of many things you might find in array, but something I've found useful. Let me just comment this again. Next, let me talk about one that I find very helpful, especially when dealing with huge sets of data like this, and that is key by. And that is, it's a collection. It's grouped in the collection category by Lodash. And what they mean by collection is anytime you have essentially arrays of objects that kind of all match each other. So you would get these back, you get collections back often from APIs. In this case, we've got our results of all of these characters. And each of these models or each of these objects looks very similar, if not exactly, has the exact same keys. And we have an array of 50 of them. So we could call that a collection. So what does key by do? Well, one of the things is basically this app right now, I am simply taking these results here and I'm just setting them to list and simply looping over them. However, let's say that I wanted to create some kind of UI that that actually gave you a modal or something when you clicked on one of these. Created some sort of highlighted state that the user can initiate. Well, what I can do, and so let's say that I do that by let's say I do that by sending a click event to my card. So the user is going to click on it, and when they click on it, they are going to get some sort of highlighted thing. Well, the way I would probably want to do that is I would want to send the ID. Each of these items in my collection have an ID on them. Is this big enough to see? Doesn't need to be in there. So each of these has an ID on it.
Yeah, can you make that a little bit bigger, Russ?
Yeah. So they all have an ID on them. So I can pass that through and I can set that ID on state. And I've just called it highlighted. All right, and now what I can say is that my my highlighted hero is essentially going to be the one that the user clicked. And so I need to find in the list the ID. Let's say I click on ABOM, and ABOM has ID of 1017100. I then need to find in this list that thing and show some UI. So what I could do is I could take the list and I could just do an array find. And I could say that when the item ID equals highlighted, let's use that. And then for my highlighted hero, let's use highlighted hero.name. And let's see what happens. Okay, so that would show me that. The problem here is I'm dealing with a really huge set of data, and using this find method is it is more for JavaScript to compute, because you basically have like a whole loop of 50 that you've got to go over in order to find the right one. And also find, I think, is going to look up at MDM. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I don't know if find breaks after it actually finds the first one. I do think that this only finds the first one. What would be nicer is that if I could just do a straight up object lookup by taking that, if I had a set of data that looked kind of like this array, but was keyed by the ID that I'm looking for. So that's exactly what keyBy does for you. So this is going to do, let's set results by ID to this date. Let's set results by ID to Lodash keyBy and then a couple arguments. So let me just comment it here. So what does keyBy take? keyBy will take that collection. The first argument is going to be the collection, and then you can pass it the actual key on that collection that you want to create your map from. Your what is that? Like a hash map from. So now I save that, and you can sort of see the difference of what the data looks like. Is that I now have this object, this very large object, but it has keys for kind of what I care about. So down here in my render, instead of highlighted hero having to loop over an array, I'm going to just say that this is my hash map now. And then I use that highlighted key that I've set on state. So this should just be the ID that I'm looking for. And this should give me this. And then I can say, if highlighted hero is actually defined, then we're going to show this. All right, so now let's check it out. All right. So this is just sort of like one kind of situation, but I've used this a lot, especially when working with Redux or other kind of like, when you're dealing with large data sets from the API and you don't know exactly when and how you're going to need to look them up, keyBy can be very useful. So let me keep moving, and I'm going to talk about, let me just reset my state. And I'll move on to another example. Next, let me talk about a few utility methods that are are useful for strings. One of the things that Lodash has is they have string methods for all these different types of cases. Some of which, like, you've probably heard of camel case. Not sure if you've ever heard of kebab case, which is probably my favorite because I like kebabs. Snake case. And then things like uppercase, lowercase, things like that. Those are really useful. Where I find these especially useful are, well, kebab case is really nice for creating like URLs, if you want to take a name. One situation where I might use it here is I've put IDs on each one of these. Dude, I kind of want to look at some different heroes. Hold on. Let's look at these. Look at Sabretooth here. So I put IDs on each of these. They are not very useful. If I wanted to like hook into these via JavaScript or something like that, that would not be extremely useful, that ID. I've been writing a lot of end-to-end tests recently. So an ID that looked like this would be really annoying. So what I could do is I could use camel case instead to take this name, which Sabretooth Age of the Apocalypse. I'm going to pass that in for the ID attribute instead. Now we can see that what it does is it takes it, it strips out sort of special characters, and then it camel cases it for you. So super, super handy. Those string functions come in very handy. Then find my last example is going to be something that I use. It is a crutch, but man, I'm never giving it up. There's this method for objects called get. And I actually learned about this when writing a Gatsby project, because one of the Gatsby boilerplates I used was using get all over the place. And I was like, this is kind of obnoxious. But then I realized how often it kept my my UIs from breaking completely. So what get does is it allows you to send in to like look at deeply nested data at a particular point in the data. And if you've been working with APIs very long, it won't be long until you get into a situation where you're dealing with multiple levels deep of data, and there's just no way to unravel it, and it's a real pain. So for instance, let me just quickly turn off. Take this out. So for instance, these people, these heroes, have all of this kind of data. They have like relationship data, like the series that they've been in, the stories that they've been in. They also have this thing called events. I have no idea what this actually stands for. But let's just say I wanted to present in this UI their first event name. Okay, so now like we are super deep here. We've got our list, but then we want the events, and then we want the items on the events, and then we want the first one, and then we want the name. So one way that I could do that is I could just simply try and to get the items. So events is already being passed into card. Just take that one as a given. I've at least gotten down to this part in my data. But I need to look at items. I need to look at the first one, and then hopefully get the name. Well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen when I do that? Inevitably, I'm working with an API and I don't have full, complete control over it, what's going to happen? And I guess presenting without any feedback is hard, but this will break. So if any of these don't have an event at index 0, this whole thing's going to break. If one of them did not have items as a nested object, or as a nested array inside the events object, this is going to break. So let's reload that, and what's going to happen? Oh, name, can't read name of undefined. And I have no UI. And guess what? That's affects every view. This is where get is really comes in handy. Because what I can do with get is I can send it 3 arguments. The first is, and this can be however deeply nested you want it, but I always just send like the least that I can, the object that you want to start looking at things on. And then you can actually use dot notation like a string to look things up by their index, or if it's just an object all the way down, you just use dot notation to delineate it. And then the third option is a default that you can give it. Now, one caveat to this is that if this returns null, it will not get your default, or undefined, it will not get your default. So the default can be a little bit tricky, but what you can do is you can pass that, and then when we refresh, here we go, first event, NashJS. So you can see all the ones in here that don't actually have any event data, but I can show that, and I can like look for that easily and display different UIs. So maybe what I want to do is not put this on here, and then just say, well, only show this thing if the first event name is actually defined. So that way you can, it just seems to help me more quickly show the stuff that I want to without like worrying about the sanctity of the data that I'm getting it from. If it's there, great. And I rely on that one a ton. So that is a little bit about Lodash. It's a really handy library that, yeah, I probably rely on a little bit too heavily. But if you're ever wondering like, oh, why doesn't JavaScript just do this already? Go look at Lodash because it's probably in there. And that's it. I'm muting now.
Thanks, Russ.
Were there any questions?
Yeah, we did have a question about tree shaking in case you only need like 1 or 2 functions out of Lodash. Is there a good way to do that?
Ooh, yeah, what a nice leading question. Let me share my screen again. So you'll notice that the way that I was able to import these, and you can actually see it in node modules, is that Lodash will come with each of smaller JavaScript files for each one of its functions. So you can import the functions one by one. You don't have to import the whole library, and that can help you keep bundle size smaller.
And for those of us that aren't familiar with tree shaking, could you speak to why that might be a good idea?
Oh, man. So essentially, this is going to make it easier for Webpack to bring in, I think tree shaking is a way of sort of saying, I'm not sure that I can speak intelligently about tree shaking, but I do know that by pulling in only what you need, when Webpack goes to make your your comments file, like JS files and things like that, it's going to pull in just that function, not the entire library and a bunch of cruft that you're not using. So yeah, I don't know. We'll chime in about that. I'm trying to get better at not like trying to speak as if I know things that I don't know that well.
Yeah, just not talk for the sake of talking.
Right.
I get that. All right. Do we have any other questions? There's about a 10-second delay, so I'll probably wait 30 seconds to see if things clear in chat. But if you've got a question, it would very much help if you're just like, I have a question, then you can type it.
Cool. Well, thanks, y'all. I appreciate you letting me present. I might do more of these if people enjoy them. So let me know.
You should do a talk on Webpack since you love it so much, Russ.
You know, I do know how to configure the hell out of a Webpack. What Webpack's actually doing, I don't have any idea.
Yeah, it's fun. I could probably do a talk on that, honestly. Might be overdue. Ryan says thank you. He says thank you, Russ. So you use your whole name. Might mean you're in trouble, but
cheers.
Yeah. All right. I think we're good to go. Thank you so much, Russ. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Russ.
Right, I'm going to
awesome,
get some water, so I'm turning my video off. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, we'll definitely welcome you back for further talks on Lodash or really anything. And if any of you, anyone else out there is interested in getting a quick lightning talk like Russ gave, we're always open to having, first-time speakers, new speakers, whoever. If you're interested in giving a talk, don't be shy. We'll get you up here. We'll help you out, help you put something together, and yeah, we'll get you on the schedule. So reach out to any of us. Really, join NashDev, ping the channel, and we'll get you on the schedule.
Andrew Harper had a question about Webpack alternatives. So there are a couple other things out there. Parcel actually works pretty well. Broccoli, you see in the Ember area, it works really well. There's a couple other things out there. A lot of different frameworks kind of have their own built-in thing.
I've been a big fan of things like, it's still using kind of Webpack under the hood, but things like Next.js.
Yeah, exactly. It's a kind of a different way to think about it.
Webpack stuff away from you. You don't have to really mess with it. You just drop some plugins in. Or even things like NX is using, is basically a monorepo tool, but it basically scaffolds out things like a Next.js app or a Create React app or a Nest.js app, things like that. There's a lot of like schematic generators that'll, you don't have to mess with a lot of the stuff. So, but it also gives you the flexibility. Both of those will give you the flexibility to actually extend your Webpack config if you need to. So, cool stuff there.
Yeah, Florida, I have not looked into Snowpack yet, but I will look into that, and that could be actually kind of interesting. I'm always looking for new ways to do things. I work with our front-end infrastructure team, and we're always trying to find new ways to make our bundle more efficient because we have a very, very heavy client-side app, and so always kind of looking to see what's new and cool out there and how we might be able to get some more performance out of things. So appreciate it.
We'll say a couple years back, we had Gulp and Grunt and all these different build tools. It's been nice to at least have some kind of stability against Webpack, even though the API has changed a good bit. But it's been nice not to have so much churn on all the tooling and stuff. So, but I welcome any improvements or even newcomers. So, cool, Josh. You want to give Isaac an intro here real quick?
Yeah, for sure. So it is my pleasure to introduce Isaac. Hopefully he's back with us. He's probably still getting set up. Yep, he's coming back. There we go.
Hello.
I had the pleasure of working alongside Isaac at the Iron Yard back when he was a student, and I've kind of seen him advance in his career. It's a really exciting thing to say about a lot of people now. I feel like I'm old and I've been around for too long, and so I see all of you presenting and doing awesome things far beyond what I could even hope to do at this point. Just an engineering manager that answers Slack messages and gets on Zoom calls all day. So basically what I'm doing right now, this is my job professionally. Yeah, so Isaac's gonna do a talk on Vue.js, which I think is great. Vue's another one of the big contenders out there. It's a little bit more batteries included than just a React library, which I really appreciate. And I think you'll probably appreciate a lot of that. And so I don't want to muddy the water and say stuff I don't know for kind of like what Russ said. Like, I'm not going to talk for the sake of talking. So I'm just going to let Isaac just jump right into it. And excited to see him back talking at NashJS.
Sweet. Thank you, Josh. Yeah, so just a quick intro, I guess. My name is Isaac Weber. Like Josh said, I graduated from the Iron Yard back in 2016. Shoot, I'm trying to come up with things to say. I currently work at Business Credit Reports in Gallatin. I do full stack development with Shadow Smith. He's probably in the chat somewhere. I also, the stack that we're about to work on and see me build this app in is actually what I use at work. And it's what I'm in daily. Yeah, so let me just kind of start with, I guess, just kind of an overview of what the technology stack is. I wish I had slides made, but I was kind of told last minute that I'd be doing this. I guess the last speaker ended up getting sick or something, so I ended up taking over. So I only had a couple days to prepare, and so I don't have like a ton of stuff put together, honestly. So bear with me. So, alrighty, let's see. So I have an external monitor right above my head. So if I'm looking up, that's the reason. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Can we just confirm that everyone can see my screen, or at least someone in the chat that can talk to me?
Gotcha.
Yep.
We're good? Sweet. Okay. So first off, I'm just gonna give a brief intro into GraphQL. Actually, let me get back to, where am I at? I lost my spot. Why GraphQL? Okay. Actually, we're just gonna go to the GraphQL site.
Yeah, Isaac, do you mind bumping the font up or zoom in on the browser a little bit?
Yeah. Is there a way to see what you guys are seeing?
I can post the stream in your chat real quick. 1 second. There you go. Maybe you can pull that up.
You might want to mute that as soon as you open it, though. Otherwise, you're going to hear your audio like 10 seconds behind.
You're going to have like a Drost effect going on.
Let me just pull this up super quick so I know where you guys are looking.
But yeah, erring on the side of bigger is better. It's always a good call.
Okay, so all right, let me just. All right, how's that? Is that better?
Can you go a little bit bigger?
It's like huge on my screen.
Yeah, I know. It's because you're on a widescreen.
Here, I wonder if I.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Cool.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly talk about GraphQL and why it's cool and why there's benefits. And so GraphQL was created by Facebook, I think back in like 2012 or something like that. It was used internally for their own projects, and they eventually open sourced it. I believe it was in like 2015. So it's been around for a little bit, but it's still pretty new. Still growing. It's a baby. It seems in the tech world. So yeah, we're just gonna jump right in. So with GraphQL, you're able to define shapes of your data. So actually, I might be jumping ahead here. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Here we go. So some of the benefits of GraphQL, you're able to actually ask for what you want. The reason this was implemented was essentially there was all these APIs, all these data endpoints, like all this data that these engineers needed to grab, and there's teams across many different aspects of the company, right? And it was somewhat difficult for these teams to coordinate well and to be able to essentially do what they needed to do without talking to like 50 different teams, right? And so GraphQL came up, or I'm sorry, Facebook came up with this thing called GraphQL, which is a specification for it's a specification on top of your API. And so they say it's a query language for your API. And so what that means is you can ask for exactly what you want. And usually when you're doing like REST endpoints and as I'm sorry, hold on a second. I did not mean to click that. So if we actually take the example of Marvel, they in their documentation, they have all these endpoints, right? And so there's like public character, there's the public character's ID, there's, that you're getting all this information, but each one is in its own endpoint. And so this is kind of the thing that GraphQL aims to solve. And by just asking for what you want. And so for instance, in this example we see here, they're saying, I want a hero and I want the hero's name. And then if you just ask for that name, you'll only get Luke Skywalker. But as soon as you ask for height, the name and the height, you'll get that. And so on and so forth. And you can start to build these queries where you're grabbing all the data that you want. Instead of having to grab this massive data object that then you have to sift through and do all these operations on just to get the data you want, you can actually just ask for the data you want. And so there's that's one of the main benefits of GraphQL actually, is that you're not overfetching, you're not underfetching, you're getting exactly the data you want. And that actually going back on Russ's talk with Lodash, it actually somewhat kind of takes away that need for certain Lodash methods, because Lodash kind of gives you the ability to an easy way to filter through data and to get data that you want and stuff like that. And so GraphQL actually, since it gives you already what you want and it gives you the shape and what's expected, you don't necessarily have to use Lodash or something. Lodash is still useful, but it could take away the use case in some way or another. Let's see. Okay, so hopefully that kind of makes sense, and we can start to see like what GraphQL is. So we define this type, right? And this type is a project, and we're saying this project has a shape of, it has a name, which is a string, it has a tagline, which is a string, and then it has contributors. And what this little like array thing means, it's saying I want a list of contributors, and those contributors are of the shape user. And they're not showing that here, but it would be a similar type of project, if that makes sense. And we'll get into that deeper, and I'll show you exactly how that works. So now when you query for this, you're saying, I want a project, and you're passing a param that says GraphQL, and then you're asking just for the tagline. So you're not asking for name, you're not asking for contributors in this query, you're only asking for the tagline. And then it says get predictable results, and you're given exactly what you're asking from your API. And that's incredible. And it if you've ever tried to hit an API with just like these massive endpoints and these massive data points, it's like, you have to drill down like 5 levels or whatever. But this, you can just ask exactly what you want. And that is amazing. So like I said, this is a specification. And so it's not like an implementation of, it's not like this is JavaScript or this is anything. It's not like this is a programming language necessarily. It's just a specification on top of what you already have. And so all of these languages are currently supported in GraphQL. And my preference is JavaScript because I'm a JavaScript developer. And yeah, so that's just kind of the quick intro of GraphQL. I might have taken longer than I wanted to on that. But yeah, so now I'm going to move on to Apollo, which is not that, this. Okay. So Apollo is a way to interact with a GraphQL server and a GraphQL client. And what Apollo gives you is these tools to bring up or to spin up servers, to tell Vue that you want to do a certain query. It gives you a lot of really useful tools. And Apollo is, in my opinion, the gold standard for interacting with GraphQL. There are other clients that provide different tools like Relay, which is from Facebook, but my opinion is a little bit complicated, and just an easy way to get started is with Apollo. So I really like this tooling, and we'll see once I get into it, just like the different ways that we interact with Apollo server, which is the back end, and Apollo client, which is the front end. And Apollo client actually is integrated with Vue, which gives us the ability to run like front end queries against our back end GraphQL API. It's saying my internet connection is unstable. You guys good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, things are looking okay, man.
You still okay?
If you don't mind, zoom in again a little
Okay.
bit on this. If you're going to stay on the screen, though, it's a little small.
Okay. Well, I'm actually going to move on.
Okay, cool.
But I'll make sure to zoom in. Does making the window smaller, like in width, make a difference?
No, you probably have to command plus into it because of the resolution. I think you're in like on a 4K monitor, and anything less than 20 is going to be hard to see.
Here, I wonder if I can do this.
Share just the window and resize it, it'll scale it on Zoom. But if you share your entire screen, it's gonna be 4K or whatever. So if you change the actual window that you're sharing on the Zoom client, then the actual size of the window will scale.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think I'm gonna keep it on this just because I need the space. But I scaled it on my display. So did that make a difference?
Yeah, that actually did help quite a bit.
Sweet.
You still might need to make it just a little bit bigger, but not much. Like.
Okay. Yeah. Just let me know if that's an issue. Okay, so enough of talking. Let's get to coding. Or actually, let's talk about one more thing. So now that I told you about Apollo, GraphQL, and Vue, well, I guess I didn't talk about Vue, but we're going to talk about Prisma now. So Prisma is a, okay, there we go. So Prisma is a just a really easy way to spin up a database, really. And what Prisma gives you is based off your GraphQL schema, it actually gives you CRUD operations. So what you do is you define certain, you define certain types. So like we saw earlier, it would be like type user or type project or whatever, right? And then you throw that in a certain GraphQL schema, and Prisma will look at that and start generating everything you need for that schema. So all the CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete, that sort of thing. And it will give you a client in order to run those operations in your just in your regular database. I'm sorry, in your Apollo server. And so, okay, let's start to see what this looks like. So I designed this thing called Good News Only, and that's what we're going to build. Can you guys see this? We all
Yeah,
good?
I can see it.
Sweet. Yeah, so it doesn't look quite like this because I was kind of scrambling and I had to get some things done. So there's some things in here that aren't actually what it's going to look like in the end. But this is what we're going to build. So you have this first UI, and this is kind of like the sign in, right? And so a user can enter their username, and in the app we're going to build, we're going to have a password too. And then once they're in, it shows their username right here, and then it's going to say your good news, which is the news that you've posted, and then all good news, which is all of the good news from everybody who's on this app, who's signed up. This is a little modal thing that I did not build. And then once again, here is kind of like these items that you've created already. I wanted to do this like publish thing, publish, edit, and delete, but I actually didn't get to that. So maybe if we have some time, I can build that too, but we'll see. Sweet. So yeah, this is kind of like the empty state. So this is like, if nothing's there, then it will show this. And then you can click this button here, and I'll actually open up this modal, which you'll be able to enter your good news. And then if there's no good news from anyone else, then this will be shown. Okay, enough talking. All right, let's see. That's not what I want. Okay. I keep like opening stuff that I don't want to. Okay. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah, you're good.
Sweet. I mean, is it like small, or like I just want to make sure that everyone can see what I'm doing and people can understand and not have to squint, like within reason.
Yeah, I think within reason.
Okay, we'll just bump it up one more. Why not? Okay, so first off, I'm just gonna kind of go through this example project, or this boilerplate project that I created. The reason I did this was because there is a decent amount of boilerplate, and I didn't want to bog everyone down with that. So we are going to let's just first look into our just our packages real quick. And so this is just like a bunch of dev dependencies that I needed for ESLint. There's probably a bunch of crap in here that I actually don't need, so just kind of disregard this. This is the good bits. So Apollo server is what we talked about earlier, and that's actually what gives you a GraphQL server. Or it allows us to use the GraphQL server. And then bcrypt, we're gonna look into that. That will help us hash passwords. And then this is the Prisma client that we can interact with those operations that I talked about earlier, those CRUD operations. So first off, I am just we'll just start here into a bunch of this stuff is just boilerplate stuff. Like I said, this is just like some ESLint stuff that, like, when I tab and save, it will go back to normal. So first things first, we're just going to import this index.j. I'm sorry, we're going to look at this index.js. So first things first, let's just import this Apollo server. Apollo server gives us a bunch of different tools, and then this GQL thing essentially just it's like a GraphQL. It tells Apollo server that this is a GraphQL tag. So this is actually where we're defining our type definitions. That's what they're called, and we're going to say this is a user. And so this type of user has a name that is a string. So we're saying this is like a strongly typed language. And so what we're doing is saying I want whatever is returned here must have a name, and it must be a string. So this little hash, or this bang right here, is saying whatever's this return value is, it must be string. So if I got rid of that, or I'm sorry, that I'm wrong here. It's this is saying just this part is saying it's a string. And then what that bang is saying it cannot it can't be null. So and I'll show you that in a little bit. So when we query this user, so now we're saying when we query for something, we're going to say, I want to query a user, and then it's going to return me the type user. So that's going to return me this shape. And so when in GraphQL, there's these things called resolvers, and resolvers are actually what just like the name implies, they resolve the data. And so as you see, we're literally taking this shape, and we're just peeling out the layers that we want to return. So we're saying, okay, this type query, now we're going to go inside of that, and you see user has the ability to resolve data. And what we want to resolve is this type user. And you notice this shape is exactly the same as this type here. Hopefully that makes sense, and you'll start to see it once I open up this playground. So if I go over here to my playground, which is this really cool thing that GraphQL gives you out of the box, and it's honestly probably my favorite feature of GraphQL. So if we just, I don't have my server running, so if I just npm run start, oh, that's not it, npm run dev, and that's just essentially nodemon looking in my index.js and looking for any changes. So now that I've created this these type definitions and resolvers, I'm actually passing them to Apollo server. And Apollo server, like I said, is the thing that's giving us all these amazing tools that help us to build GraphQL servers and all these things. So what we do is we say, let's pass our type definitions. So it's going to look and see, okay, we have a type user. We have we want to be able to query that user by user. And then we're just going to pass them in here. And then once we start the server, we just say server.listen and then console.log, and we'll say we'll just go ahead and run that. So that when we go to localhost 4000 where this is ran, we'll see this GraphQL playground. And then if we go ahead and hit play, we'll notice that this data is that was returned is the exact shape that I just said. So this user is actually returning this shape. So I can say, oops, I can say NashDev, right? And as long as this is a string, it's going to be fine. It doesn't matter what this is as long as it's a string, because I've explicitly said this name has to be a string, but it has to be a name. So let's say if I did this, it would fail. Sorry, I didn't save. Oh, no, it wouldn't. I lied. Never mind that coercion, I guess. You learn something new every day. Anyway, so we'll just move on. So now let's just like start adding a few different things. And we should probably get going because I don't have a ton of time. So, all right, now I am going to just implement we're gonna start the Prisma stuff. So I have Prisma globally installed, and I'm just gonna say Prisma init. Prisma, if I could spell Prisma init. What this is gonna do is ask me a few different things. It's gonna essentially configure a server for a demo server for me with a MySQL database running in their Prisma cloud. You have the option of creating your own, and that's kind of a deeper conversation. We'll just go with this for the sake of simplicity. So I'm selecting demo server plus a MySQL database, and then I'm just going to say host it here. I think that had the lowest latency. And we'll just say, and these are just the configuration options for this Prisma server. And mind you, this is our database running in their Prisma cloud. So I'm just going to select the JavaScript client because that's what I'm running. Okay, now it went ahead and generated the necessary things that I need in order to connect to that Prisma client and do what I need to do with my operations. So here we say it generated this, or it created generated data model in Prisma.yml. And I'm just gonna, that's not what I want. I'm just going to create a Prisma folder just to keep it all housed in the same place. I'm going to do that. We're going to say Prisma. Okay. We say we're going to change this to, oh, goodness gracious, GraphQL. Okay. So what just happened here was Prisma just gave me all these things. So it gives me this data model.graphql, and that's literally creating these database tables in MySQL for me. So as soon as I start creating something, like let's say I start creating posts, which actually is what we're going to do next. So I'll say it needs an ID. And some of this is Prisma syntax, so don't get this too confused with what we're doing with our Prisma server, because it's somewhat synonymous, but it's not quite. So essentially, this will give us an auto-generated ID for every single post that we have. And so then we'll say, I need to reference this. Hold on a second. On that post, we're going to have a title, and it's going to have a string. We're going to have a description. It's going to be a string. And then we're also going to have a user per post. And so with Prisma, this actually gives us a relational connection with user. So we don't even have to say, like, we don't have to go in our database table and make these connections or anything like that. We can literally just say, I want a user on my post data type, and it will do that for me. It'll make that connection. And then, but we can also say your post. So if you remember from earlier, we actually saw this. So this is essentially saying, I want a list of posts. And so this is literally like an array of this shape. So when we return it, it would be like, you know, this had ID, blah, blah, blah. You know, it would literally take on the shape of what we see here. And by so we can also add these flags here that tell GraphQL these things can't be null. And so, for instance, like if the bang is inside of this list, we're saying that there's this type, there cannot be any null values within this array. And then outside of it, we're saying the list itself cannot be null. So when you return the value, it can't be null like this. And that's a little bit confusing right now. So we'll just leave that off. This is essentially saying like allow almost anything. The list itself values inside the list can be null, as well as the list itself. And so, okay, now moment of truth. Okay, hold on a second. Oh, actually, we need we're gonna say we're gonna need a username on string or on the user, and then we're gonna say this is unique. And so this is another Prisma thing that allows us to say every single user with a username, it has to be unique in our database. So if I created a username that was like Isaac Weber, and then someone else came along and said, I want a username Isaac Weber, they wouldn't be able to do it because there's a unique constraint. So now that we've created our data model, now we're going to say Prisma deploy. And what this is going to do, it's going to look at what we have currently in our data model and start creating those relations. It's also going to create these fields. It's going to create all these things for us that we'll be able to utilize in our Apollo server to create data. So let's see. Yeah, so what we can actually do is look in our Prisma GraphQL server. So by saying Prisma in it and then doing a demo server, they've given us this this HTTP playground. So this is like straight up database operations, right? So like create user, create post, create update user, update post, delete post, upsert user. They give us all these things for free just by doing this data model, which is freaking incredible. And like I don't need to know SQL. I don't need to do anything like that. I can just have these here, and then it will generate these things for me. And these can get much more complex. There's like certain relations tables that you can create based off of like these directives, and it can really get complicated, but in a good way. It just gives you a lot of power. So this GraphQL playground is running on this. It's some like EC2 instance that they gave us through the demo, but we can actually run our queries against it. So like I'm literally running a query against my database right now. And I'm saying I want the users and their name. And that's the only reason I'm able to do that is because I specified that I have users and I also have a name. And notice how it generates like the plural versions of everything. So not only can you get like a single user out of your database, but you can get users and posts and whatever else you created. It could really be endless. So I'm going to save this for a little bit later until we get to our GraphQL server implementation. Sweet. Okay. So now in our index, we're going to go back to this, and you might think like, well, what is all this for then? And that's a good question. So basically what's happening here is Prisma just generated all that stuff for us, right? Like I said, and those are database operations. They're like straight up, like you would think of them as equivalent to like SQL statements, as like SQL queries, right? And usually you don't want to just have like raw SQL queries hanging out there. You want some abstraction layer on top of that so that you can build certain like implementation logic that's like, you know, a user must be logged in, and if XYZ happens, then do this. You know, like there's certain things that you want to do on your data, on your API before you return data, right? And so that's where our Apollo server comes in, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. So we're essentially just going to mimic the way that our database operations worked, but it's a little bit different because it's through Apollo server. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to paste some stuff in. So I feel like I'm moving very slow. So, okay.
Presenting without feedback is hard. You're doing great.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. So I just pasted in, essentially it's almost a mimic of what our data model is. So you see that we have a user, we have an ID, we have a username, we have your posts, we have all this stuff, right? Speaking of which, I think I might be missing some things. Okay. Well, anyway, so yeah, so we've almost mimicked exactly what our database is going to give us, and that's for a good reason. So let me just paste some stuff in here too. Okay. So I've kind of talked about this already, so I'm not going to talk about it again. But something new that we have is called mutations, and mutations are literally just a way to mutate the data. Like it's a way to think of all the CRUD operations. Create, all right, it wouldn't be read, it'd be create, update, delete. Those sort of operations are designated for mutations. And that's another GraphQL thing that GraphQL recognizes as like data changing. So and then we saw queries earlier, and when it comes to our Apollo server, these match up directly to our resolvers, and same as our mutations. So if you want to think about these as like shapes that when you query for something or when you mutate something, these are things that can be returned. And then the type mutation and query are like designated things that that GraphQL is looking for to do specific things. So query, you're just like returning data. So when you say like all posts, you're just give me all the posts. Me, that would be like it returns a user object, because like you you have a username, you have posts, you have all these data attributes. Hopefully that makes sense. So as you can see, let me just get out of the server. So as you can see, as we saw earlier, the shape reflects here in the resolvers. And so we're essentially saying to GraphQL, like this is the shapes that I want. These are all shapes, right? And they all give me certain data. And then the resolvers, once again, are how you actually return that data. And so let me just get Prisma in here. So So like I said earlier, Prisma gives us this Prisma client, which is essentially all those operations that we saw earlier. All these operations, you're actually able to use them now through the Prisma client. So that means within our resolvers, we can actually return the data from our database through these through the Prisma client operations. And so with the Apollo server, we can actually pass something called context, and context is a way to pass context. It gets run on every single resolver. So when we pass context to the Apollo server, like this, we're saying every single time that a resolver is run, this stuff can come along with it. And we'll see how that's done. So we'll actually just comment this out for now. That's some future code. So what I'm doing is I'm saying the request object that comes with just, you know, every single operation, you just pass that along to the resolver. And then what I'm saying here is Prisma technically is our database, so I'm just like renaming it to be DB, just for shorthand. So we're saying, you know, just rename every Prisma thing that we're doing, just say it's DB. And then if we scroll down into our resolvers, we can see how we're using that. And so inside of a resolver, this is like typical boilerplate stuff. And so every single resolver that corresponds to like a query or a mutation, it's going to be inside of like this query object. So like I said earlier, it reflects this shape, right? So it'd be query and then me, and then so we'll just look at this first, this query. So this resolver, we'll actually, I want to write this out because I want to show you. So just disregard this sync thing for now, async thing. So we're gonna say me, and then just it's like a method, right? And every single method, every single resolver has these properties or these arguments that you can pass through it. So we're gonna say parent. Oops. And the order matters here, so just be aware of that. Just say parent, args, and then context. And there's actually one more called info, and that's some information about the operation that was ran, the resolver that was ran, but we don't need that right now. So what's happening here is the parent is actually like, I'm always a little bit confused on what this parent does, but it's essentially like the parent of the query. So like if we were querying just for this or something, like it would be the parent would be post. And then args, which are arguments, we've actually I'll actually show you in a little bit. And then context. This context is something that I just talked about. So how we're passing it here, since we've created this context object, we're passing it to this Apollo server. We now then can access it in our resolvers, and on context we have some things that we can access. So we have the request, and then we also have DB. So like I said earlier, those things are just passed through here. So I'm going to kind of take this back now and show you how those things work. Okay. Hopefully this will work. Okay, so once again, we're back in our GraphQL playground, and the really cool thing about GraphQL playground is it self-documents. So everything that we just wrote here, it knows what it is. So I'm sorry, this is the wrong thing. gonna get rid of this stuff. So if we look at the docs, and I'm gonna go ahead and reload. So notice how when we created these type definitions, they're showing up here in the documentation or in the docs, and that's for free. Like as soon as I wrote these and I reloaded, GraphQL Playground is showing me all the types that I just implemented. And that's a big deal, because when you're looking through API docs, you're like, what the heck's going on? You know, you don't know this, that, or the other. You have to kind of drill through. You have to use like Postman. They might have like an interactive thing, but it's not that great, and blah, blah, blah. But if you have a GraphQL API and the implementer actually turned this GraphQL Playground on in production, you'd be able to see all these operations. And you can literally just like play with it, and you can open up and you can see exactly what type or what is supposed to be returned. So you know that me is supposed to return an ID, it's supposed to return a username, it's supposed to return your post. And then you can see, oh, it's connected here, right? So this post, this shape it will return these things. And these, since I connected those two things, I'll be able to query for, not only can I query for users, but I can also query for their posts. I don't have to make two separate API calls to get users by their posts and the users. I can just get everything I want all at once. And that's the power of GraphQL. So let me just do that. Let's see. Okay, so what's happening here is we don't actually have any any posts yet. We just have kind of the shape. There's nothing in our database, and so that's what's happening. And so why don't we just go ahead and go to our Prisma database layer, which is like straight up from the data. Like these are queries that we can run against the database. And I'm just going to create one quick. And I know I'm moving fast, but I'm going to come back to this. We're actually just going to create a post. So just kind of notice how when I'm going through this, it's like auto completing for me, because when I've created my data model, it's given me all these things that it already knows I want, and so it can just feed it to me, and then I can say, actually, this is not what I want. We'll say Isaac, or hello world. I think it's yelling at me because I want a user. No, what do I do here? There it is. It's not right either. Okay, so I just created a post real quick, and then now I'm going to go back to I'm going to just go back to my Apollo server layer, and then I'm going to return exactly what was just created. And so the reason why we can do this is if we actually look into the all posts implementation, we can see that this resolver is all it's doing is returning the post from our database. This post thing, it's like super simple. It's when you say post like that, it's saying every single post, or just if we wanted users, it would be like that, right? And so since all posts, this resolver is expecting this shape, we can come back up here and we can say, okay, post, it requires a title, a description, and a user. And that's exactly what we've gotten back, right? So what we've queried for, we don't necessarily, like I talked about earlier, we can grab what we want. This is the shape that is expected. So if we say anything else other than that, like tree or whatever, or what, I don't know. Yeah, sure. So it's like, you can't do that because that's not actually on the post object. And that's really powerful because you can catch mistakes before they even happen. You're not going to query for something when it's not there, because GraphQL will be like, yo, I don't even know what this is. Okay, so I am going to try to move faster. Am I running low on time?
Oh, you're fine on time. No worries.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to start importing some stuff that I need just to get it done. So I'm referencing the project that I actually already built, and I really hope we can get to most of it. Oops. Okay. So I'm just going to redeploy my Prisma server. I'm actually going to delete it. So when I say Prisma delete, it will just go out and delete my database, which is probably not that safe, but this is demo, so we can do it. And it'll say, do you really want to do this? And I say yes, because I don't care. And then Prisma deploy again. I just added a few different things just to go ahead and do it. Okay. Sweet. All right. Yeah, we're gonna use that. Okay. All right, now we're gonna jump into the front end because I need to do that. So let's get this up. Wherever my API is, there we go. Okay. Yeah, so this is a Nuxt project actually. So similar to Next, if you're familiar with that, it's basically the Next but for Vue. And it's called Nuxt. So what I ended up doing was just creating like a boilerplate boilerplate project, and by just doing like npx, I think it's npx create Nuxt app, yeah, like this. So that kind of gave me this like default structure, and then I imported a bunch of stuff that I need. So I'm just gonna start going ham with doing other stuff in the background. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do now is just start configuring Vue for Apollo. And there's actually some configuration in here already. But if we look at the Nuxt config, this is kind of where you would want to start if you're going to do a project like this. This thing keeps messing me up. Okay. Okay. All right. So what I ended up doing was when I went through the configuration, I selected the SPA mode, the single page application, and then I have some ESLint stuff in here just to help me format my code. I have Tailwind in here. I have this Nuxt module. You can find that at Vue, or it's called Nuxt Vue module or something like that. And then this is like the Apollo configuration. And so we talked about this earlier with Apollo client. And so Apollo client is actually how you interface with GraphQL through your client side code. So now that that's configured and that's in there, I'm gonna create this. I'm gonna create this this folder called. That's not where I want it. It's going to be called Apollo, and this is all the configurations that we need for our GraphQL server. So what we're doing here is saying essentially connect to our backend, which is hosted at localhost 3000, and then we're saying connect dev tools, which I'll show you that in a second. This is our in-memory cache. I'll show you that as well. And so this is just kind of like the boilerplate default configuration that we'll need to get this up and running. And then within this Apollo folder, I've created this mutations folder and our queries folder. And so these are GraphQL client-side GraphQL queries. And so you see that they're called, the mutation, create posts, blah, blah, blah. These are like the mutations that are actually going to like update the data or do something with the data, and then the queries, right? And so these actually mimic very closely with what we have in our GraphQL playground. And so what's really, really cool about GraphQL Playground, and I can't stress this enough about how freaking awesome GraphQL Playground is, you can almost like mock you can almost act as if you're the front end with this tool here. You can say like, I want to do this mutation. I want to see like what's returned. You can do all these things without actually needing a front end. And that's what's so cool, is that you can test out all these things. You can decide what you want from the data. You can just play with it. And all of that just comes with a GraphQL server. But we obviously need to interact with it through a UI. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll just quickly explain what this is. So the GraphQL is a little bit different on the front end. So when we create, this is a little bit simpler one. So when we create a mutation on the back end, actually I'm going to pull that up. So this is on the right side is our back end, and the left side is our front end. Let's go to our index. So you'll notice that sign in correlates with this mutation. So you have to specify this just in a little bit of a different way, but we're saying it is a mutation. It has the name sign in, and it's going to take these variables. It must have these arguments, and that's where we're just like double checking, triple checking that these things exist, right? So we're saying the username variable must be a string, the password must be a string, and it cannot be null. That's what that means. The bang, and then for some reason we have to repeat it. I kind of wish this was better in GraphQL on the front end, but we're essentially just saying like the variable that's passed in must be this value. So we kind of have to do this twice for some reason. So what we're saying here is, like I said earlier, that this must be that value, but then we're also, once this mutation resolves, we're going to return this ID of what's being mutated, as well as the username. So what we're actually doing is we're mutating the user. Oops. So you see this here, it says user. So that anything that is on user, we're able to return from this operation. And supposedly best practices say that it makes the most sense to return the thing that you're mutating. So I mean, it makes sense, right? So if you're like saying create post, you're gonna like return the post, and hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so as you can see, like each operation will correspond with these mutations. So we have create post, which is right here, and then kind of similarly with the way we did it before was we're passing in these variables, and then we're returning a shape of something, right? And so the way that we implement it on the back end is saying we want to return the shape of post. And you see we have an ID, we have a title, we have a description, and that's what's been updated. So when you create a post, we're just returning that. And same thing with all these operations. And then for this query, it's much simpler. We're just saying it's a query. We're just like saying this is like the name of it, but then this is like the actual query operation. So we can actually write that in our the same thing in our GraphQL. So like you might see it like this, but what we can do is actually say query, and then like all posts, and then so on and so forth. Actually, let's do this again just to make it. So, you know, like this thing doesn't matter. Like we can infer that this will work, but for the front end, we must do it like this. As far as I know, you have to have this be very explicit on what you're returning and what the name is. Okay, I just wanted that little side thing. So, okay, same thing with me. And what's really cool about GraphQL is that you can just like, you can ask for what you want, right? And you can build these data structures the way that you want. So if you say I want a user to have houses and dogs and all these crazy data types, but they're all nested, like you can build those things, but then you can also like subtract them with the queries. So like when I'm asking for this data here, this is me querying for this data, right? So like if let's say in this me query, I'm like, I don't really want to get their username anymore. I literally just take it out, and I'm no longer querying for that data. It's not being queried for. I won't get it back in my response. So okay. All right, now let's get to some fun stuff, hopefully. Okay, I'm just gonna start creating a few different pages that I know I'll need. So with Nuxt, if you've ever done anything with Next, they give you this pages folder, which anytime you put anything in here, it'll actually create a route for you. So you don't have to like set up any routing configurations or anything like that. You just literally write, you just write it right here. Simple as that. I'm gonna need a sign up. We're just gonna copy these. No, we're not. I don't want to do that. Sign in, sign up. Okay. Now I know I'm gonna need a component called card. Okay. So this is super basic. Just this really basic Vue component. And what we're doing here is this template when you say template in Vue, it actually won't be rendered, but everything inside of it will. And so we'll get to this lot in a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of show you that real quick. So I know this is a lot, but I don't really have time to go through it all, or at least type it all out. I will explain it though. Okay. I believe item middleware. Okay. I'm just gonna restart my app because I'm sure it's broken. Uh-oh. What's going on here? What? Okay. Oh, you know what? Oh, that's right. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry, guys. For some reason, some of this stuff isn't getting rendered. Oh, I know why. Okay. Sweet. Okay. I don't think this index is right. That's why. Alrighty. Okay, so I think we're just gonna start with let's just start with the sign-in page because that's where we're at. Okay, so what I ended up doing was creating this template, right? And the sign-in page is essentially just a form, and these forms, you know, it's pretty basic HTML, honestly, for the most part. But then there's like little Vue things sprinkled in, and then these classes are from Tailwind, and it's like a utility class. Just like quickly show you this. So I guess we'll go down to this like button or something. So this Tailwind gives you the ability to just like quickly write these classes. So I don't actually have to write like CSS. I can just write it like with these utility classes. So instead of like this is saying background indigo 500, let's say 400. And then you're gonna see this button change to a little bit lighter, right? And so like basically every single CSS property you're given through Tailwind, and then you can just plop it in here. So like padding, the axis of padding would be 4. The font is bold, text is white. Not sure why this is doing this. Should be just like that. But yeah, it's pretty simple, pretty nice. That's how I built this. So we're going to just quickly go through this. So on inputs, it's just like a typical input, but then you see this V model thing. And that's something that Vue gives us to attach to inputs. Well, I think it could be pretty much any text value, or I'm not like a Vue expert, but I know that what this does. So when we say V model username, we're saying whatever data is passed in here, we're going to actually take that data and then like store it in this data attribute. And so we can actually see that in action by just doing, we'll just say username, and these double brackets are how you actually render out something in Vue. And so as I type, you can see like the value that's coming out, right? And that's super easy from Vue. It's just like all you have to do is put this V model on an input, and then specify what the actual like data is, and then also return it here. So initially it starts off as an empty string, but as you type it, will fill in the data using vModel. So what we can do with that is we can utilize grabbing this data from these forms and then submitting it in a GraphQL mutation. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you that. So same thing with the password. It's a type of password, so you can't see it. It's, yeah, all secure and whatnot. So so what I'm doing here is if you're familiar with Vue, you know that you're also given this like script tag, right? And this is like where all your JavaScript will go. It's very simple layout. It's all in one place. And it's scoped to this component. So what we can do is import this mutation. And from what I showed you earlier, this is the sign-in mutation. So if I'm going to just look at this real quick. Sign-in mutation. So we can write these GQL files because we have the Vue Apollo package in our project. And Vue Apollo is doing some magic on the back in the back end and saying, not the back end like the server, but just like in the background, and transforming that query into something that's actually a string interpolation. I can't say that word. That can be recognized in JavaScript essentially. And so we can write it in GQL, but then it gets translated to a string essentially, which is really nice because I like the syntax over like some garbage syntax or like, whatever. So what we can do is we're importing the sign-in mutation, right? We're going to be able to utilize this in this Apollo mutation. And so because we've installed a package called Vue Apollo, it's right here, Nuxt Apollo, I'm sorry. Since we installed that module, we've now are given access to this Apollo thing. This $Apollo is what it's called. And you can actually look up the docs about this at just Vue Apollo. Just the first page, you get started. Like all these docs right here will tell you more in depth about what this is. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, all right, let's on submit. So if we go back up to this form, And then we see that we have this at submit.prevent and then handle submit. And so what's happening here is when these form fields are filled out, and then we hit enter, it will actually go and handle this submit. So we're saying this, it corresponds with this method. And so when we hit submit, it will actually run this mutation. And we're defining that, we're just bringing in that mutation from up here through our import right here. And then we're just specifying it right here, saying, well, I want to do this mutation when this function fires. So, and we'll run this block of code. And so, like I said earlier, we're given this through the Vue Apollo Nuxt module. So since we've passed the sign-in mutation, we also need to pass variables, and that corresponds with, I'm just gonna get back up to sign in. That corresponds accordingly with what the variables are needed. So we're saying we need these variables, right? And those things must be passed in order for this mutation to be resolved. And so this variables object, we're just passing in the variables that it needs. Like, as you see, username, password. So let's just go ahead and run it. Let's see what happens. Hopefully this works. So I'm going to say, just going to put in my username and then a password. We're going to sign in. And it did not work. I don't think. User does not exist. User does not. Oh, I'm trying to sign in. Yeah, I have a new, this is a fresh database, so I don't have any users. So I'm going to create a user. Typically you would have like some good error handling there. Oops. But I didn't have time for that. So what I just did there was a GraphQL operation, and it was very similar. So the sign up page and the sign in page are very, very similar. It's just signing, they're just essentially two different mutations, but very similar operations. And so what's happening here is as soon as I said handle submit, whenever I entered, I actually ran this block of code. It ran that mutation. It passed in these variables. And then what was given back to me was this data. I'm pulling off data off this object. So I'm essentially just destructuring data. I know that this data thing comes back on every single GraphQL mutation. And I'm saying on the data object, let's dig into that. The inside of the data object, there will be an object that corresponds to what the mutation name was. So sign up is the mutation name, or the GraphQL mutation name, which is here. I'm not sure why it's capitalized like that, but whatever. And then so it corresponds to that. And then so what we're doing here is this. We already know the shape of this data. We know exactly what it is. So we can say signup.id. We know that's in there because in this sign up thing, we say sign up ID, and we notice that this is an object, and we say, okay, we can get inside of that because, or we know we can expect what's going to be returned because we see it. We know what we want to return is right there, right? And so with Apollo, we have these Apollo helpers that essentially just it's like a way to do authentication. What's happening here is when I pass I can grab this data from here, and I'm saying pass the ID to Apollo helpers on login. And what's actually happening is if we open up our application, and we can see that Apollo token was set through the cookies. Okay, so that just happens just by using this. We don't have to do anything other than that. We don't have to like import any cookie package, blah, blah, blah. We can just use this on login, just store it in cookies, right? And so you notice that when I logged in, or when I created an account, it actually stored my username right here. And we can see that in account, or I'm sorry, in default. And so what's going on here is as soon as I get to the index page, which we were just at sign up, right? Or yeah, sign up. As soon as I get to the index page, a query is getting fired off, because on let's see, this is the default page. So what's happening here is the default page is every single page that I specify other than the center layout. And we can talk about that later. That's a kind of a Nuxt thing that gives you the ability to kind of switch out layouts as you see fit. So yeah, so with Apollo queries, this is kind of how you do it. So we saw how a mutation was done, but now we're seeing how query is done. And so this is kind of a special one, because I know I want the me query, which will give me back the username, but I don't want everything from the me query. So if we actually look at the official me query, it's like all this stuff, right? It's like the ID, username, blah blah blah, and user, like all this stuff, right? And so I don't necessarily want all of that. And so in my sorry, I keep getting out of that. In my default, I'm saying, all right, look, I want the me query, but just give me the ID of the user and give me the username of the user. That's it. That's all I want. And by doing this, we're saying by kind of doing this shape here, we can now just access this data right in Vue, which is super simple. So if I just say me, like this is the object that we're given back, and it's reflecting the shape that we just saw in the me query, but it's only giving me back username and ID, which is awesome. Like I only want it for this, right? But then in the other operations, I can do something different. Okay, so and then this is like, well, we'll talk about that later. So all right, now I'm gonna click on my account, and then we're just gonna go ahead and add some good news. And so similarly to how we did our sign up, where is it? Account, I believe. In account, we have this a little bit more complicated setup. So what we're saying here is if the queries is loading, if this me query is loading, then just like display this. And if it's v else, do the rest of this. So it's like just typical like if else statements in JavaScript or whatever else language. It's just like a conditional statement. So do this until that's done, and then do this. And that prevents some like data inconsistencies, because sometimes like the query isn't done loading before the page tries to actually grab that data, so it will fail. So you need to make sure that you're like making sure that the data is there before you're trying to access it. And so, all right, here's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to say this is some good news, right? Like I don't know. I am doing a talk on NashJS. This is the best talk ever. So once I submit here, we'll actually go ahead and look at that. So I'm doing this handle submit thing again, and I'm saying when that happens, fire off this create post mutation. And we'll look at that real quick. So pass in the title, pass in the description, and then return me the ID, the title, the description. Where'd it go? Back to account. So here's those variables that we talked about earlier, and then there's this update thing, but we'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to submit, and notice it's right there. Like there was no loading, there was no there's literally, it was almost instantaneous the way that I just added that, right? And so if you also notice, there was like a kind of an empty state. It was like, you don't have your stuff yet. And that was kind of like what the v else thing I was doing. So it's like let's see. Yeah, so I had this card that we talked about earlier briefly, that I'm essentially just saying, like, if there's nothing in this card, if there's no data here, then just display this like base text. It's like, this is where all the magic happens. You haven't posted anything yet. Go ahead and click this button to toggle the form on to then start add something. And as soon as we have data here, it's saying, okay, if the me.yourpost.length is greater than 0, then let's start rendering the data. And so what we're doing here is saying we're looping through this data. I should probably tell you where we get this data first. So we're making a query from me, which is getting the data that we want, right? And so if we go back to me, we're saying we're getting the post ID and the title and the description, the username. We're getting all this data right now on the account page, and that's what's actually feeding us this data here. So when we let's see, so there's this Apollo object again, and we're saying this is kind of like the entry object, right? And so we're saying me is an object that returns like this shape, and so which is that query that we just looked at. And so what we can do is, like, I know I just want my post, and so I'm drilling into that. I'm saying let's look inside of the me.yourpost, and that your post is an array, so we can actually see what that looks like in let's look back at this. Actually, it's a me query. Hold on a second. What just happened? Anyway, I don't know what just happened. Sorry about that. Anyway, so I'm just gonna skip that. So yeah, so we're just going to we're just going to drill into your posts and then find if the length is greater than 0, then that means there's posts there, right? And so we can start looping over it. And so we're saying v4, which is like a for loop, and then we're saying, like, this is the iterator, and then on the array. So the post in me.yourpost, and then this is like something that Vue requires to have, just like the iterator key, and then the data that's actually on your post. So we're saying by the iterator, say post.title, post.description. That's going to give us this, and then we can just add another one just to show you. And so hello world, hello, whatever. So submit, and then instantly, once again, instantly this is available, right? And you're thinking, like, how is that possible? Because it's just, usually you need to make like another database request to get this data back, right? Well, Apollo client gives us cache for free, and this is really cool. So this what I'm looking at right now is actually what's cached. All this data right here is on the Apollo cache, and so let's see. So this is just a Chrome extension that I've installed that gives you the ability to kind of look into this cache.
Hey, real quick, Isaac, it looks like you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, really? See, I think that's what happened, and I didn't realize that happened. Okay, is that better? Can you see?
Yeah, looks good.
Sweet. Okay. All right. Let me just do it again because you didn't see it, obviously. I got a new car. I got a sweet new car. I wish. So just I want you to really hone in on what's happening here in the UI. So as soon as I submit, watch what happens here. Bam, it's right there. And what's happening here is optimistic UI. And that's something that Apollo gives us just right out of the box, just for free. It's awesome. And we're leveraging cache. We're essentially writing to this cache that I just showed you. Well, I guess you probably didn't see that either, but Apollo client with this dev tool gives you the ability to kind of peek into the cache. And that's like stored values on the browser. That's like this is in cache, and it will be there until a complete reload is happening, or unless you want it to be reloaded. And so what we're doing is when we add a new post, when we do this mutation of create post, we're saying, okay, let's let's read the me query. We're actually going to reload this because there we go. So you notice how the me query right now is in cache, and there's some data on here. There's some posts on cache, right? And so what we're saying here is go get the me query, go get what's in cache, and then store it on this data variable. We're just reading that query, and the reason it's coming from cache and not from our database is because we're saying store.read query, and that the store is equivalent to cache. You could literally say cache. And then now we're grabbing that cache, and then we're saying whatever comes back from this mutation, this create post, which is this data, whatever's returned from that, let's go ahead and push and write that data to the cache. So we're saying get the cache, the me query, write the data that we just implemented, write it to that cache. I'm sorry, add it to that object, and then write it back to the cache store. And this can be like super confusing. It was for me at first, but once you get it, it's just super powerful and super cool to see. And so as like, we'll just do it again. I just love seeing it. So another post, blah, 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 submit, bam, it's right there, instant. And what's cool is like, we can go back and forth, and notice how there's no page load. So I'm going to the home page, and I'm going back to my account. These are like my posts, right? And there's zero page load. This is instant because it's all in cache, and we get that for free. That's literally by default. But writing to the cache, there is that implementation. You do have to do that in order to get this optimistic UI to show up. If I didn't have this update here, I would actually need to run a complete re-render of my stuff. So I'll show you that. Blah 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 blah, and we'll hit enter. Or sorry. So notice how that big like nasty thing that I just wrote isn't there, right? But I have to like completely refresh. Loading, bam, there it is. Like that sucks, right? So let's just continue on with this update, and our users will be extremely happy. They probably won't even know what happened. So you need to like tell them it's that quick, you know, like you have a new post in your thing or something. I don't know. So what's cool about this now is on the index page, I have a feed for all of the queries now, or not the queries, the post that was made. And so you see that on this index page, I'm getting all the posts, and that's a completely separate query. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but that's just how I wrote it. So these are just all the posts. and we can go ahead and look at this implementation. Super simple. So similarly how we did the me query, we're just going to do this, where this is like just boilerplate code really. So we're just going to say Apollo, and then we're going to say the name of the query, and then the actual like GraphQL query that we're running, which is imported from all post query, which is all this. Okay. So, and then we're just going to loop through that data just like we did before. And we know that it's a list of things, because we're saying all posts will return us a list of all the things. So if we kind of look back at our query, we're saying this is going to, all posts will give us multiple posts. It's going to give us this shape, but there's going to be multiple of them because they're wrapped in this array. Or it's at least expecting multiples. And so because we know that, because we've implemented that on the server, we can then know for a fact that we can just loop through this, and we know the shape of the data. So we say, you know, if the length, kind of similarly to before, we want to check that the length is greater than 0, and that's essentially like if this if there wasn't any posts here, it would tell you some message that's like you have no posts or something. So let's see. Yeah, so we're just looping through this again, and we're just gonna pull out that post title, that description, that username. Super simple. We'll just grab the data you want. Obviously this is like the Vue side of things, but you've seen that, you know, if let's say I don't want username anymore. Let's say I don't want a user. Actually, this might fail. Yeah, but the front end obviously has to like react to certain things like this. You kind of got to be aware of that. Like I'm trying to get the user, but I'm no longer returning it because I've chosen not to, right? And so now I just took that out. Like I don't have it in my query anymore, so I'm not going to need it in my front end, right? So I just grab the data I want. Let's just bring that back. Whew. This is a long one. Someone messaged me. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean that's pretty much it, honestly. I wish I could talk about this for days, but I can't. Yeah. So that's pretty much it, honestly. I hope you enjoyed it and it wasn't too boring. Yeah. We'll just wrap it up.
Awesome. Hey, Isaac, that was really great. Thank you so much for that. And
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of folks in the chat got a lot of it as well. Real quick, let's look and see if there's any lingering questions before we call it. But again, thank you so much. Everybody give them a virtual round of applause here. Very nicely done.
Thank you.
So like I said, there's like a 10-second delay, so we'll wait for a couple minutes, or a couple, maybe a minute or so to see if there's any questions come through. While we're waiting, Isaac, is there any way for folks to get a hold of you if they have any other follow-up questions after this, or?
Yeah, I'm on NashDev. I think, what is my username? Am I WebDevIke on that?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
So I'm WebDevIke or Isaac Weber or whatever you want to search. You can literally just DM me there. I have no problem answering any questions. My Twitter is WebDevIke as well. Yeah, so I'm honestly fairly new to the GraphQL scene, and I love it, and I'm trying to get more into it. So I don't have all the answers, but I'll try to answer any question that I can.
Awesome. Yeah, so it looks like no questions, but if anyone else has any questions, feel free to reach out to Isaac on NashDev or Twitter or whatever, and we'll get back to it. I think we have a talk tentatively scheduled. I think Stephanie Wynn's going to do a talk on TensorFlow next month. we may have some more lightning talks as well. So again, if you're interested in speaking, reach out to Russ, Josh, or I, and we'll get you scheduled up. And again, thanks again, Isaac. Thanks again to Russ, and thanks to all of you for sticking with us and trying this new format out. Can't wait to see y'all all again in person, but this is going to work for us for now. So y'all have a great night. See you.
All right. Thank
you, guys.
you.